He's absolutely right. How easy is it accessible? Is it gated? If it is gated, do they allow you to put signs up? That kind of stuff.
Okay, this should start here.
Right. I just found out.
Okay, we are live on Facebook. Let me come back to my Zoom and get that recording going. If I can find it. I always like doing this. There we go. All right, I am live. Thank you. Okay. Good morning. I've got several people in this room, and I'm sure some people are going to jump on. A little confusion with yesterday being April 1st. It was not an April Fool's joke. We had the wrong day in there, date, but we had that it was going to be on Tuesday. So again, this is the Tuesday training and tactics, new name, new date. And of course, my company all of a sudden assigned me to have a meeting on Tuesday mornings at 10. So we'll see what will happen with that. I'm right now able to not attend that meeting, but we'll see if that changes. But good morning, I'm Melissa Schwartz. Yeah, we'll change it to Wednesday. No, Wednesday we have meetings every Wednesday. I'm Melissa Schwartz, the managing broker of the Realty One Group here in Paradise Valley in North Phoenix. So good morning, everyone. Good morning. Did people have a good weekend?
Yeah.
Yes. Okay, I'm going to share my screen. We are going to, let's see if I can find where my screen is that I want to share. Hopefully that is going to be the right screen. And it's hard to see. We want to go to that. Yes, it's in that little. Hopefully that, can you check to see if that is what is being shared on? I can see it's shared here, but I don't know if that's being shared online. Make sure I've got the right thing on the Facebook so everybody can see it there. If you're on Zoom, it is. Okay. All right. I'm going to go to the slideshow. Welcome again. It is April 2nd. I hope those of you that had fun April Fool's jokes made it through without anything too startling. I met somebody last night, and we were at a evening reception, and they got a text that their dog had, was having to go to the vet, and then all of a sudden they got April Fools. It's like, oh, it was mean. I know, it was horrible. All right, so I have the slides, albeit they were my photos of the slides that our attorney provided. I'm not going to read through these, but it's a little bit of what was provided from our attorney, Alex Mija, was it really last Friday? No, a week ago Friday, right? Yeah, it was a week ago Friday. So if you have not caught up with what is going on with the legal settlement with NAR, we're going to talk about a little bit about these slides. I am not going to read each of them, so we'll get you a little bit of information on these. Sorry, folks here are having trouble because my photo's in the way. Hold on. Move me out of the way here. And I guess nobody else is on the Zoom right now. So hopefully people know how to still link into that Zoom that was from Monday. I hope people didn't log in yesterday and can't log in again. We did have about 5 people log in yesterday, so it was funny. So pretty much the biggest elements that NAR says they're going to implement these changes. Theoretically, please understand that July date. There are many things that need to go into effect, but and the judge most likely will not have responded by this date. So NAR is saying that they are moving ahead with these changes no matter what. So that allows us some flexibility as both as realtors, brokers, associations, MLSs to make some changes. However, I did hear that there were multiple MLSs that I think sent either an amicus brief or something to the Department of Justice saying this is wrongly impacting an entire industry. So we'll see what comes of that. I don't have any more information on that, and I don't know what impact it could have anyway. But the key thing, of course, is that we will be prohibited from having an offer of compensation on the MLS or disclosing that there's compensation or a combined combination that would be split with a cooperating broker. Does not, again, on the MLS, it does not say, and I've heard plenty of people call me and say, well, does that mean the seller can't offer compensation? No, it means the seller can offer compensation to a buyer broker. It just cannot go through the MLS. And I'm not exactly sure, we'll see how this plays out, whether it will come from the other broker. If you recall, one of the basic tenets of real estate regarding commissions is they always have to be paid broker to broker. Now, other than when the client is paying them, right? So that's always been there. But for instance, when you have a referral, I can't pay you a referral personally because yes, I'm the broker, but I'm not the brokerage. So if you were to work on a file with me, that commission has to come through our brokerage. The Realty One Group has to write you a check and write me a check. I can't take the check and then write you personally a check, okay? So the shift here is that our sellers may be paying directly to the other brokerage, right? For the buyer to get compensated if they're going to be paying that. It won't be flowing through necessarily ours. Now, we'll have to wait and see how that actually pans out in reality, but I think that that is part of the proposal. Same thing, the buyer can now pay the brokerage. Well, they could do it before, but those instructions go to title, and thankfully we have Roberta here. We'll get to you later because I want to talk about that. But that has always been the case with buyer broker agreements. Title would take care of the buyer bringing in extra money and giving that to the buyer's brokerage, never looped through.
That would be one that I would say would negatively impact our industry. That one right there, big time.
Why? It's been around forever.
That's beside the point. That would negatively impact, absolutely would. Asking a buyer that's tapped out to say, okay, I'm gonna. Well,
Okay, but this just chill for just a second.
I mean,
No,
it's a legitimate question.
Yeah.
I mean,
But it's a legitimate question, but it's not going to destroy our industry.
No,
You
no, no,
started
see,
with
No, negatively
I said
impact.
negatively impact.
it will impact the one community it will impact is our veterans, because veteran buyers cannot make that payment, okay?
Big-
But that doesn't mean that others can't make that payment on behalf of the buyer. It's just the veteran themselves that can't make that payment,
Okay,
okay? So, but again, you need to know that that's always been available.
I know that.
Yeah.
I know it's been available.
Yeah.
I know that, but that's not my point.
Your point is you feel that that will negatively impact the industry.
Absolutely. If the seller's not willing to come up with it, and I have 2.5 written on the buyer broker,
Sure.
and I explain to them, look, here's the situation. If the seller is not willing to, come up with that 2.5, you're gonna have to pay this, and they're gonna be like, I don't think so.
Okay, so that's a great example. So let's talk about that. What happens if you see, which already exists, by the way, a zero co-broke in the MLS? All right.
I saw a couple, yeah.
Oh, no, it's already there. It's been there for months. So we've seen them earlier. No, because prior to 6 months ago, you had to have $1 in there. And we really didn't have very many that said $1. But the ability to have $1, yes, was there. The zero was just recent. But it's there, and we do have some folks that are doing that. So in that scenario, today, with our current documents, you would need to do what? Does anybody know? If you're the buyer's broker, what would you need to do?
If it says zero,
Yep.
Have them sign up by a broker.
So you would need to have your client sign a buyer broker. Okay.
Mention for you as the buyer.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So are you looking at that before you're going to show listings right now?
oh, yeah.
Right now, no.
Well, I mean, I'm working with a buyer, that's one of the first things that I did, was buyer signed by broker.
Okay. And did you discuss the fact that there are listings that do not have them?
Yes,
In your buyer broker, do you have written instructions to tell you that if there is zero listed or something less than what you have on your buyer broker, that you have permission to call and ask about a co-broke, one. And two, if no co-broke is truly being available, that they're instructing you not to show that property to them.
I had that conversation, but I do not have that in writing.
Why not?
It's not on the buyer broker as it exists, correct?
No.
So I have to just kind of write out my own terms and have them sign it?
Yep.
Wait,
Okay,
why would they?
that should be on the buyer broker in my.
Okay, the buyer broker is being revised.
Okay.
It is being revised, with all of
Between
this.
now and then, we have to come up with our own.
But there is a section you can write in.
There's additional clause, there's a section for additional clause,
I think I
additional
asked
stuff.
that question. Yes, that's right. I
Yeah.
asked that question.
Yeah.
But I didn't answer you. I got the wrong answer.
Oh, well, see, that would be a really good point to bring up here today. So please do not go to the Arizona Real Estate Forum on Facebook and get your answers from there. Please do not ask other agents. Because here's part of the reason I had somebody ask about a different question, which I'm going to kind of go into detail here in a little bit. But one of the things that came up was I immediately picked up the phone and called our designated broker, because ultimately our designated broker is the one that makes the decisions here in Arizona for all of our corporate offices. And I said, what is your response to this? How do you want us to perform? So back to your thing.
Yeah.
If right now there is a zero, if you all should be looking at the MLS, and if you're working with buyers and see what the commission breakdown is, you should all be working with your buyers to get a buyer broker. Now, here's the thing. If you don't need the buyer broker because there's a co-broke, great, won't matter anyway, because right now the MLS still hasn't offered. But if they say no, okay, move on, right? Go ahead and work with them, because right now you're covered, okay? Unless that says zero. But you just need to know that before you take them to a property that says anything less than what you expect
Right.
as your commission, you need to have that conversation, okay? And yes, I do. It has always been the case that if you are not going to go view properties because of a commission or for any other reason, right? That is because of something the buyer has instructed you,
Mhm.
you should have those instructions in writing.
Okay.
But the instruction would be from the buyer. Since, let's say, they understand the buyer broker agreement and your commission payment from the buyer side, that if you find properties that they have an interest in that say that they pay zero commissions to the buyer's agent, that you are okay not to go with them or not to take them to these properties because they don't want to see them,
There's
right?
one thing before that. It's a two-part element. One is,
Can you write that out?
That's what I was gonna
Yeah.
ask.
I will get it written out
Okay,
and send it out,
perfect.
but the first part is that they grant you the right to call to find out if there is the possibility for a co-broke.
Sure.
So I had a listing last month, and we had a lower buyer broker compensation offered, I guess. It wasn't that low, but the agent was insistent on getting 3 tomatoes, okay? So she wanted, we're all with Realty One Group. So she wanted this number that was in her mind that she wanted this amount. So before she showed the property, she called and said, will the seller increase the compensation as noted in the MLS? So any guesses on what my response was?
No.
No. I'll check.
I'll
You
ask
can
the
do
seller.
that. You can
I'll
ask.
ask the seller.
Yours is no. No, my response was the seller is very reasonable. Please put your offer together and they will review the entire offer as a package. Okay? Which in legal terms, right? In contract terms, what was I telling the buyer's agent to do on that offer?
Make one.
No, but what was I telling her when they wrote the offer? What was she going to need to do?
Compensation, the extra added
Yeah.
compensation.
So there needed to be seller concessions to the buyer
Oh,
to
okay.
cover the buyer broker agreement. She said she had a buyer broker agreement for a certain amount and our commission offered was not that amount. So the seller concessions were going to be specific to that difference.
Okay, so that's
Okay?
on page 2 of the contract, right?
No, it's
No,
on
the first
page,
contract.
Seller concessions?
Yeah.
Page 3.
3, sorry about that.
well, it was cash.
Okay,
So can she write it on page 3?
page 8.
Page 8.
Page 8, okay. there
She
you go.
wrote it on page 3,
Addendum.
but guess what? Section 2 does not apply because it's a cash offer.
Ah,
So we had to remove it from section 2 and put it back on the counter offer. Not, it doesn't go to page 8, it just goes on the counter offer. But because section 2 did not apply.
And did your client go up? Did your client go that extra?
all right.
Yeah.
Okay, it all worked out.
But again, it had to do with how much was what was the total offer?
Right.
Were they willing to adjust that? There were no other concessions asked for. There was just this teeny tiny concession for the buyer broker agreement.
And it was your seller making that adjustment, but not you on your commission.
Correct.
Okay. So it's also been my understanding that when you put an amount, let's say on your buyer broker agreement, you put 2 tomatoes and the seller is offering 3, then that's good. But let's say you put 2 tomatoes and the seller is only offering 1%. Then according to that agreement, your buyer has to pay that additional one tomato.
Sure.
because you have-
So, yeah, so, but.
Tomato.
Right. In reality, that is correct today. I expect when that buyer broker is redone, and I think I don't know that it's actually on these changes here. But what is going to happen is that, we will see that variable option. Well, it has to go away because there is no MLS amount. So first of all, that's going to go away. But also what will go away is if there is a offer of a bonus or something like that, the buyer broker will stipulate, I'm almost positive, that any additional bonus is to go to the buyer and not to the buyer's broker. So you will have to see how that is worded. It is possible that, again, you could negotiate with the buyer that either it's going to go to you and the buyer accepts that, or it goes to the buyer, or perhaps you split it. But I think that that's a negotiable element with your client, but I don't know how that's going to be worded. But I do know that at this point, any type of additional incentive will not belong to the agent, it will belong to the buyer.
Is that because of Article 1 on the Code of Ethics and Standard of Practice? Protect the growth of interests of your client?
That's
It comes down to compensation and you're looking at what I can get. I'm just curious.
It's actually addressed in the settlement agreement.
Oh, is it?
yeah, I think it's the idea that the buyer's agent was getting incentivized in some cases, and the buyer wasn't receiving part of that incentivization. I don't disagree that your
curious.
article might be correct, but it is in the settlement.
In the language of the settlement says that the buyer, I don't know what you call them, their buyer broker agreement, has to have some certain amount. So either a
Correct.
percentage or a flat fee. Anything that's offered over that
Right,
belongs to the buyer.
right.
So could you write it where you'll accept a minimum of,
No.
but not to exceed?
No.
It has to be.
It cannot.
It
has to be a certain amount.
My thinking is you can write your buyer broker agreement with your buyer that it's 3 apples.
Mhm.
But then you can also put a provision in that says if 3 apples aren't, if we're not able to get those 3 apples from the seller's agent, or, negotiating it within the deal, if we're not able to get those 3 apples, then I buyer agent and willing to go down to 2 apples.
No,
with
I
one
don't
value
think
up.
you can
That's the
do
other
that
one.
in the, I don't think you'll be able to do that in the buyer broker.
Okay,
You don't have to pursue the buyer for any, but it won't matter. I mean, yeah, it will matter. So, but I'm trying to compare to what's in the MLS. So at this point, I would say I would hold off on that line of reasoning. I think you have to, as you said, the buyer broker is going to have to stipulate one amount, either a percentage or a dollar amount, period.
So during that conversation, my client mentioned, let's not look at any below the.
That amount.
Yeah.
So you must get that in writing from them.
Okay,
And,
Okay.
but here's the twist though, you really need to start with, and I would put this in writing, may I call, just like I received the call,
Mhm.
will the seller contribute? Now, again, the response I gave, which I think is probably the I don't know if it's the best response, but certainly a solid response without my literally calling my client and saying as the listing agent, will you accept this? The problem is we don't know what the offer is, right? So until you know what the offer is, you don't know whether it's going to all pan out. So my comment was, and I do know my seller very, very well. I sold her the home 21 years ago. So, and I've known her for those years, but, is that I knew that she was reasonable on what her net would be. We weren't at a point where, oh my God, I have to get X dollars and anything that is gonna impact those dollars, we would just be off the table, right? It wasn't that scenario.
Yeah.
So I knew that, and we weren't talking a big amount. So, this little amount to adjust by, it's like, well, as long as they make a decent offer, that's not a big amount to deal with. I wasn't trying to get $20,000 or $30,000 here. Remember, this was only a minor adjustment, right? But yeah, so let's say you have a $700,000 deal and you're trying to come up with $21,000. That's a big potential shift, right? So I understand that, but the practice should be, can I make that call?
Yeah.
And if the seller's agent said the seller will not contribute, then you need to document, and I don't really recommend text, but you could use text and then follow up with an email
Mhm.
to my buyer saying, I know you really loved the property on XYZ Street. However, they will not contribute to this. So do you still want me to go? And you understand that you will be responsible for X number of dollars to pay my commission. And that needs to be in writing with them. And you want their response back to tell you no, cross them off my list.
Am I correct in thinking that you cannot address commission at all in a purchase offer? You can't talk about commission?
So what is the issue with putting commission in the purchase offer? Does anybody have a guess? Go ahead.
It depends on how it's worded, I think, because if you're inserting yourself, you, the agent, is not a party.
Well, who else isn't a party to the contract?
The seller's agent,
And who do we work for? The brokers are not a party to the contract.
right?
How do real estate commissions transfer? Through the brokers. So there's no place for me as a broker to sign on that contract.
Mm.
I'm not signing the contract. My name isn't on the contract. So the challenge is, it all depends on who's picking up the tab. So I think title would probably say they're fine with it if the buyer is agreeing to pay that, or the seller is agreeing to pay the buyer's brokerage. The seller's a part of the contract. If it says seller concessions and the seller says, yes, I'll pay those concessions, then yes, you can include it.
You can explain what the concessions are for.
Yes, but you have to be a little careful in that. So please email me under the circumstances. But in the scenario I dealt with, so normally I have written in the past, the seller concessions, the seller agrees to provide the buyer $5,000 towards buyer closing costs. That's how I've written things in the past, right? In this scenario, they wrote, seller agrees to pay, buyer's closing costs, including the buyer broker agreement. Okay, and in fact, I think they wrote another sentence said, the entire seller concessions will be going to the buyer broker agreement, right? Because it wasn't for any other closing costs. It was very specific to that one cost, okay? Could have been used for something else, I guess, but that was what it was for, and they were being very clear that that was what it was for. Well, that's fine, because the seller's agreeing to pay closing costs that are buyer closing costs. Their buyer broker agreement is a buyer closing cost.
Good question though.
Yep.
If you just say buyer broker agreement though, there's other things in the buyer broker agreement that have nothing to do with the.
Really?
actual cost, don't they? Isn't there like a date, like when you hire them?
But that has nothing to do with concessions.
I know, I guess what I'm trying to say is, should we, when we write that, should we just say buyer broker agreement, or should we say a compensation in the buyer broker agreement, so they know it's for the compensation of the buyer broker versus anything else that could be written in the buyer broker agreement that's nothing to do with it? Just to be more clear, is that?
I don't think it matters because it's dollars. You're talking about dollars. The only thing on the buyer broker agreement are the dollars.
Probably
So-
cleaner not to refer to the buyer broker. Wouldn't it be cleaner just to say buyer brokerage fee of that?
No,
Seller to pay buyer
No.
brokerage fee of that?
no, because it is paid from, let me let title answer that question. Hold on a second. I'm gonna change this up so I can see my camera here real quick. But I'm gonna switch this over. You're slouching, okay. Don't want you slouching there. Whoops, I'm having trouble getting that. So, there you go. So this is Roberta Tyndall, our escrow manager from Rock Title. So what are your concerns about that being written in the contract, and how do you, I mean, you've paid buyer broker fees before.
Yes, we're an instruction taker, the bottom line. Whatever instruction we're provided is what we follow. So if there is a buyer broker agreement and we're to be compensating a buyer's agent or paying a buyer's agent through escrow, we need a copy of it.
Yep.
Plus broker signed instructions.
So you would need something beyond the contract?
Yes. Yeah, we always have commission instructions.
Oh, commission, that's fine. Commission instructions, that's fine. And those are signed by our brokers. So, and just a tip here, folks, if you're doing your CDIs, those do not come to me directly to sign. Yes, I sign them, but they have to go through our office administrators beforehand. But just going back to this buyer broker thing, it's not going to make a difference to you whether that says, buyer closing costs include, to cover a buyer broker agreement or buyer broker compensation, as long as it's referencing that that's the instruction.
Yes.
Okay, now what happens if it says to pay a buyer broker compensation and there is no buyer broker agreement?
Then I'm gonna need to see a copy. Or an instruction from the broker, you're to collect X.
Okay.
And in your scenario, it's a cash transaction, so I don't know that wording really matters. You're not appealing to a lender,
Sure.
where your other agent did write specifically for the buyer broker compensation. I don't think that so much matters.
Right.
Seller's giving buyer a credit of X.
Right. And the only reason they detailed it out, because they were trying to be very clear that the buyer was asking that specific to cover that agent's fees. They had made the phone call on that. They were trying to be consistent with that. So I think that was the reason. And I don't disagree with that. I think as a buyer's agent, you want to show that clarification. Now, if there were to be, say, $15,000 worth of seller concessions to the buyer, you could write including, but not limited to, and add title fees, escrow fees, appraisal fees. I mean, there's a laundry list you could throw on there, but I would say including, but not limited to, and you might add buyer broker compensation if you wanted to include that on that tagline, including but not limited to ... right? And I think that would be fine. You don't have to specify it if you're providing that buyer broker agreement to title, because by sending that buyer broker agreement to title, those are specific instructions and title is going to have to pay for that. So But I do think the concern would be is if your buyer isn't aware that some of those fees are being used for that, and they certainly should be aware of that. But again, that is about communication with your client, okay? I have all these slides here. Everybody here, if you don't want these, I have lots of things I can talk about on here. I'm gonna actually flip through really quickly. I think, yep. Oh, you don't want it on you? Oh, come on, Roberta, it's fun. It's like she doesn't want to be on the camera anymore. She's like, I'm frozen here. Please move that. Okay. So this is talking about the following changes, what is being implemented. There are several of these. Just so you know, if you've gone through and looked at some of these in Arizona, and I want to make sure you guys know this, in Arizona, many of these things were already done years ago. Okay. And I said this 4 months ago when we started seeing settlements, because I was seeing the settlements, and we haven't been able to filter or search listings based on compensation for years. Okay. Our MLS has changed that a long time ago. So you've got to remember that this is a national settlement, national lawsuit, dealing with things all across the country, not specific to us. And I think a lot of our realtors are like, why are we being punished? We already were doing these things.
Right.
Understand, not disagreeing with you, but you got to wonder what the rest of the country was doing for all these years. Is what my take on that is. So
Yeah, I heard that California reached out to Arizona. This has nothing to do with it many times because Arizona's contracts were supposed to be pretty darn good.
yes.
So
California's are very confusing. And by the way, I think in California, they love slashing through things on the contract and initialing all over. Please, please do not do that here. We use addendums. We do not go back to our contract and fill in an initial. It is very hard to track when all that happens and stuff. So we don't do that here, but there are other states that is how they do it. And it's not illegal. It's fine. But you better make sure you've got all those initials and it's sequenced correctly. So look, there are a couple of things here, and the reason that I'm gonna, whoops. Oh, I don't want to do that. Sorry. Please tell me I still have that on there. I was just trying to move that out of the way. Okay. This was kind of interesting, talks about more flexibility. So Realty One Group, we are considered 100% model. Realty One Group does not take anything of the commission, right? Your commission is yours. We have transaction fees. That totally is different than part of the commission. So think about the brokerage that have a, 20, 80, 20, 30, 70, and then a 6% licensing fee and all these other things. Those are all based on the commission. Nothing Realty One Group collects from you is based on the commission.
Wow.
Other than on our rentals. So, and I have not actually heard anybody talk about the rental market on this. And at some point that'll be fascinating. So yeah, I can't wait to make the phone call to that landlord agent and say, are you going to be offering more than $100? Right. If you can even get anybody on the phone. So I'm not quite sure where that's taking our rental market here in Arizona, but so I think this is interesting with the inventory. Will more sellers want to list their homes if they only feel they need to pay their listing agent? To me, I would flip that around. I've already seen a listing pop up that they got it was an email blast that said seller now offering go broke. So my comment to you, if you are a listing agent, it is your responsibility to go to the seller and encourage them to list their property with a co-broke, certainly right now, but in the future, because here's the thing, we have low inventory, but if nobody is going to go look at your property because you're going to get those phone calls saying, is your seller going to offer this? Is that helping your seller to sell the property? Right? If people are not viewing the property because there is no co-broke, you only need one buyer, I get that, but you got to get people into the house.
you need a bigger buyer pool.
Right. And so it is going to be your opportunity and your commitment to facilitating that co-broke in the future that is going to be able to continue that process. Now, totally different market if we had, you know, 40,000 homes on the market and it's a seller's market. That's a totally different scenario. Then you know what? We've seen this all the time. The market condition changes. They offer less to everybody, right? Oh, all you have to do is put a sign in the yard. Yeah, guess what? That won't be the case anymore. Right? Put a sign in the yard and yeah, there'll be people that'll walk up and say, hey, I want to buy your home. Awesome. Okay. I'm gonna look at this real quickly and then I want to come back to that point because it's very, very interesting about somebody's just going to walk up. So I'll talk about an unrepresented buyer in just a second. Buyer agency outlook, agreements will be needed before showing a home to a buyer. It is my guess that we will have 2 buyer broker agreements. One will be a buyer broker light. Oh, you want to go this weekend and just see a couple homes? Great. I'd love to work for you. Here is my agreement. This is only going to be for one, a weekend or for 10 days. We'll reevaluate it afterwards. We're not going to go into something long and involved, or they're walking into an open house. Great. You want coverage? Then here you go. Maybe there'll be 2 people at the open house. One will be doing buyer broker agreements. The other will be showing the house. I don't know. But at any rate, you are going to need to have something, or you're not going to show the home, right? So one of the things that agents feared in the past, I don't know how many times I heard this, and this was before I was a broker. I don't want to use a buyer broker agreement. They'll just go to somebody that doesn't care about it and won't ask for it. Guess what? Everybody's going to care.
Yeah.
Everybody's going to ask for it. So no harm, no foul, ask for it, because if they don't want it, then fine.
So this will impact not just realtors, but also agents that are not realtors as well, as far as mandating them that they have to sign the Bible before showing properties.
No, they don't have to. They just don't have to get paid.
Okay, but I'm saying that impacts everybody, no matter if they're realtors or not.
Well, if you're a real estate professional, you probably were doing something like this before because you weren't getting compensated out of the MLS if you weren't a realtor. So
So you are most likely filling out that. with
you were doing something to get compensation.
So are you saying now that there should be buyer broker agreements on an open house and they should be signing that before you can even let them see the house?
No.
Because I've heard that scenario.
No, well, no, but it is an interesting idea, especially if you have 2 agents there. Maybe one is, getting buyer broker agreements signed, even if they're just a weekend long buyer broker agreement. But the problem is then, are they going to go to the next house? They can still see the house, right? But if they want to see anything else, you would need to get a buyer broker agreement, right? So it's an opportunity to provide that explanation, and we'll see what buyers think about it. Because I think that is a key way to get new buyers if they're not working with an agent. And again, very soon, everybody is going to need to have a buyer broker agreement. Okay, unless the buyer wants to be unrepresented. That's a fair thing. So fixed fees, a la carte options, there may be people that'll charge, I haven't seen it yet, but charge, XYZ to go look for, I'll show you homes for the next 2 weekends and you're going to pay me this.
Yeah.
Right. So, I mean, it could be a la carte. And then once we get, you have a property that you want me to write an offer on, I'll charge you this for writing an offer. I'll charge you this for working through inspections. I mean, there's a long laundry list once you get under contract of everything that buyer's agent does. So, again, seek concessions from the seller, and will the listing broker share his commission? That will all depend on how that works. There's one of these. So, the biggest thing, and this we've talked about, we've said this, buyer broker we've talked about, but communicate your value, right? Both as a listing agent and as a buyer's agent. What do you do for your clients? Now, there have been lovely things. You can pull them down from NAR on what a buyer's agent does. If you have not done the ABR, you can do it for free. Right now, they don't have any in-person classes left, but I do believe you can still sign up for it for free. Every month I get something, that comes out, talks about, this is talking about low inventory. It's often talking about, what's your value? So gives you things, identifying and overcoming, this is on bias, ways to help home buyers manage expectations. Oh my gosh. I did not, how many times have you heard me say that in the last 2 months?
Mhm.
Working to make sure you're managing your client's expectations, right? So here, this is one of the things that has popped up in the ABR. I think that is going to be the key, right? So for anybody that is online watching what's going on with NAR, how many of you are dealing with these sellers? Well, I don't have to pay a buyer's agent anymore. Well, yeah, that's not exactly the case. You may think that, but the question is, how soon did you want to sell your home? Right? There's no co-broke right now. Did you want to sell your home in 2024? Right? I mean, seriously,
Yeah.
we have a window for those that are working in that we're in the 85028 area zip code right now. All of us know school is about to end. For those that don't know, we do have this little, especially for our larger family homes, we do have a little bit of flurry of activity that occurs right at the end of May and beginning of June to get people in their homes by July, because school starts in this area the first week of August, for those that don't know, Scottsdale PD schools. So there is a flurry of activity. Roberta, you always see this in title. There's this big uptick, right? Everybody says, I don't want to move in the middle of summer in Arizona. Well, guess what? Of course you do. If you've got kids, you want to move when the kids are out of school, right? Now, ironically, East Coast, if kids are coming from Chicago or New York or any place in the Midwest or the East, their school doesn't end until the middle of June or the end of June, right? As late as literally the last week of June, because they don't start until after Labor Day. We start in August. So if we have this kind of window that the biggest pocket of our transactions are going to occur, the end of May and June, beginning of July, right? And you've got a seller wanting to list their home right now and they don't want to offer a co-broke. Are you sure you want to hold out and not offer a co-broke as we go into the height of our season? Oh yeah, that'll be great. Everybody will want to see it because it'll be on the market. Okay. And you know, again, you're going to have very clear and concise communication to say, that's fine. I'm going to let you know when I get these calls. And you need to send them in writing. I received 3 more calls today asking if there was a co-broke. And I told them, as you instructed me, and that better be in writing, the seller will not offer a co-broke. And they told me they could not see the home. Okay, after
Is that today's or is that for the future?
I'd be doing it today. If your seller is not offering a co-broke, or they're offering what we would consider a low co-broke, right? If you are, first of all, you need to get them to say, put in writing to you instructions. You just like, I don't want to see any offers under XYZ dollars in writing, can just be an email to you. And you can have the conversation with them, right? CYA conversation. Thank you so much. Here's my email to my seller, right? Thank you so much for talking to me today at 11 o'clock, Mr. Seller. I appreciate the conversation. I'm just going to recap a couple of the things that you instructed me on how you want me to handle this listing, including the fact that you've offered 0 co-broke in the MLS. And should I receive any phone calls from buyers asking about a co-broke, the answer is no.
When are they gonna remove it from the MLS where it's not in there? No word on that.
No word.
NAR is still saying that they want to have the new rules implemented by mid to late July.
They are saying that,
Yeah.
but they do not control 50
we'll see.
state associations and hundreds of MLSs.
Yeah.
So it's great for them to say that, but there are a lot of other people involved.
Pretty optimistic, I think.
But it doesn't matter because currently they can put 0 co-broke. And if they're hearing this news and they want to offer 0 co-broke, you need to deal with it as if that's the case.
Question, if they're putting 0 co-broke, or they're not, say even in the future, they say, I don't want to pay the broker commission. Does that only apply to the commission aspect strictly, or could they still be okay with paying the concessions that could potentially equal out enough to pay the dry broker commission? Or is that, if they say the 0 co-broke, that also means
No,
no
no,
commit-
no, 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 no,
concessions
no, no,
that
no, no,
equal
no,
that?
no, 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 no,
No.
no, no. The buyer can always ask for concessions and they can use those concessions for any of their closing costs, including a co-broke.
Okay.
But the element is that if they're not offering it, then the agent and the buyer's agent and the buyer need to understand that the buyer is going to have to ask for those concessions to cover it, and they may not get it. right? So, whereas when I got this call, I said, depends on what the total package is, right? And I think ultimately that's going to be the case. It's going to depend on what the total package is, right? Again, mine was a little teeny tiny amount, little different than, 15, 20, 30, 40, $50,000, right? But I'd say most of our commissions are in the range between $12,000 and $20,000 that I typically see. So those are going to be, options that you could certainly do via concessions, depending on what the offer is. Now, the buyer that says, I want to offer 10% or 20% below, and then ask for, 6% in concessions, yeah, I think you might need to give them a little math education on how that pencils out. What is the net the seller's going to receive, right? You need to work through that and say, that's great. The home is listed at 500 and your offer of $450,000 less another 6% is a 420, and I'm not doing the math here, $420,000 offer. Do you think the seller with something that's priced pretty much close to market value at the 450 or at 500 is going to take 420? I don't know. We can make the offer, be happy to write it. Okay. This is setting those expectations, right? That's what that article is about. Set those expectations for both buyers and sellers.
Yeah,
What is-
sellers might write up something, don't show me any offers that net me this much money.
They could do that.
includes The commissions. that I will
Absolutely.
pay out for the-
Absolutely. That's fine.
Isn't this NAR settlement really coming down in the future to the buyer's broker gets paid by the buyer and the seller's broker gets paid by?
No, nothing says that. It just says it can't be in the MLS. And that's the key thing I want to make sure you understand. At no point does anything in NAR's thing say that the seller cannot pay this commission.
But I wonder if
Nothing.
That's a trend.
No, it's not. It's not a part of the settlement, period. So you please don't elaborate on that because a lot of people are misinterpreting that. I've heard people say, oh, the seller can't pay a commission
Right.
to the buyer. That is not true. The buyer's agent.
Putting videos up saying that, I'm like,
Oh,
Nope.
yeah, it's gotten
No.
ridiculous.
That is not, please read, that there was never in any of the comments.
I realize it's not
Videos,
settlement,
but-
but isn't that
said
the
that
trend?
NAR
That's
sued
buyer's broker is going to
billions.
be paid by
You
the
know,
buyer.
Why? Why do you say that?
Because more and more sellers are gonna say, well, I can list for a $990, or I can just pay you, and somebody else needs to pay their broker.
So, okay, but this is a really great point. Hold on a minute, guys. So, a really great point. So again, to my seller, I'm going to ask them how many people do they want to come through their home? Right? And so I know you said the 990, forget the other numbered company that was around before. Again, it was a seller's market. All of us were selling in 3 days. All of us, right? I can't tell you the number of homes I sold in 3 days. Right? I had a total marketing plan, worked like magic. Okay. It was the market conditions, had nothing to do with that company. And neither does this other plan. They are actually, that is a revamp of an old plan that they had before. This is not new. Okay. And we have had the all buy your home type things that have been out there, right? We've had all those. There are going to be sellers that are going to say, yeah, I'll list your home for XYZ dollars. That's all you're going to pay. Great. But guess what? They now can't, they could put a sign in the ground. Who's driving around neighborhoods? Right? They could put it on MLS with zero, there's no co-broke, right? Can you tell me how many of those agents actually answer their phones? So we're going to be calling them trying to find out if they do co-brokes?
So you can't put on the MLS, right?
No.
Can you put it on your sign on the listing? On side it says seller offers co-broke
Rider.
or something.
A rider?
A rider on top of that, you think that'd be?
I don't know if that's possible. I do know that on your personal website, you can list the co-broke you're offering. Now, the problem is our feeds on our websites all come through the MLS. So you can't actually put it on and attach it to that listing, but you could have a tab that says, these are my listings and these are my co-brokes that my sellers are offering, and it can be on your website. Okay.
And what you could do for your rider or your sign is you could have the QR code on your sign that takes them to that area on your site.
I think that's probably what I would
Yeah.
do
And you can get vinyl, you can get little vinyl stickers made that.
for QR codes.
For QR code, if that's not on your sign now.
Right, you can add a QR code to
So they
your
have to scan it, go to your site and see if that property is offering, or
Yeah.
the seller of that property, because if they can't put it on the
But-
wire itself, they have to do it.
I think you'd be better off sending them to your site, because then you have control over it. Right? And it's more, yeah, that's fine. So I want to go back to something, because I have had this question and a little bit off of this, but it really is an impact of this, is what about these unrepresented buyers? Right? So somebody walks into your open house and says, I want to write an offer on this property. What are the challenges with that?
And you ask them if they have a broker.
Well, yes, you would ask them, do they have a broker? Please call your broker. If you if you have a buyer broker with somebody, please call that agent you have a buyer broker with, right? No, but no, they actually are unrepresented. And I have to tell you, there's a very funny reel. I did not remember the agent's name on this, but there is a very funny reel out there. She absolutely deadpans this entire conversation on how incredibly what an amazing opportunity it is for buyers on their single largest purchase in their life to do this on their own. They are so ready to do it, and how amazing. And, they can get through their offer, and then, it's all uphill, because then they get to do all of their inspections. And of course, find your own inspector. And it's hysterical. I will have to find it. And but it was like, she did a great job, because it's like, yeah, wait, why would I be doing that without help? Like,
Yeah.
I don't know anything about inspectors. I don't know anything about what I can negotiate. I don't know anything about deadlines and making sure I maintain it. But back to the
And then they
unrepresented.
expect us to help them.
Right.
Title will like this. I had an agent call me. I had an agent call me yesterday and ask, could the buyer call title, because their agent was being unresponsive. Our agent had nothing to do with this deal, but they'd gotten wind of this and they were trying to recommend help for this poor buyer. And they wanted them to go to title to have title explain the contract to them. And I said, no, do not call title for that. It is outside of their area of expertise. They'll explain the title documents and closing paperwork, but they will not go over the purchase contract. Let's go back to unrepresented buyers. I just have a few minutes here. So very, very important. In our brokerage, our designated broker does allow you to write a purchase contract on behalf of an unrepresented buyer. But there are a couple of key things you need to maintain, and that is, be very careful you don't create implied agency. So the first thing you need to do is the buyer agency form. Does anybody know how you fill out the buyer agency form with an unrepresented buyer? Nope. So the top of it is going to say, bless you, Realty One Group and your name. And you go all the way down, and at the bottom under the buyer section, there are 3 options on the buyer section. One says buyer as buyer's broker. The second says seller as seller's broker. This is under the buyer section, right? And the third is that you allow them to show you properties that are listed by the same brokerage. You check the box that under the buyer section says seller's broker. Okay, under the buyer section. All right. And that is to make sure that they understand that you are working for the seller, not the buyer. You can then provide to them the buyer advisory, right? Here is information. You're the source of the source. You're going to give them the buyer advisory. You can also give them wire fraud. As you go through that offer, what is your conversation going to sound like? Anybody want to make a guess?
Working with the customer as opposed to a client. Just treat them honestly.
Honestly and fairly, yes. What about your opinion?
Better leave it out.
Better leave it out. Your opinion has nothing to do with that offer. You're going to ask them what their name is. You're going to ask them, go ahead.
And you at that point, but if they say, I don't have an agent, and they don't say, I'm an unrepresented buyer and I want to buy this property as an unrepresented buyer, what I do is I kind of tell them that I'm happy to represent them and help them with this transaction if they don't have an agent.
Have you talked to your seller about that? Has your seller granted you the right to do dual representation?
Yes,
Okay,
yes.
please make sure that that's been the case.
I talked
Because
to-
you're-
when I'm hosting open houses, that's the question that I asked, and they said, of course, I want, yes. That's what they said.
Okay, so your seller wants you to no longer be able to talk to them about your opinion at that point because
It's still
your,
dual agency, so
then your opinion matters to no one. No one at that point.
but I'm just saying, if I'm representing,
If you are representing both parties, you have no opinion on the matter. All you can do at that point,
that's the toughest part about dual agency. because
Correct.
If they actually know what limited representation is, they've never signed consent to limited representation. They actually knew what it was.
well, are you then actually doing what it is?
Yes, but I've never had dual agency.
Okay. All right, so let's just make sure you understand, if you are the dual agent, you need to explicitly have that conversation with your sellers and make sure they understand at that point, you can no longer talk about value, you can no longer talk about options with your seller. Right, your seller needs to understand that they need to grant you that permission to offer up that dual agency and or limited representation. Right, because under limited representation, you can do no harm to either party because they are both under Realty One Group.
Yeah, the way I explain it is, I say, it's almost as if we're all sitting around a table with an open discussion and conversation.
Except that you can't provide opinion at all.
I'll make sure I say that in the future.
Because your opinion is gone at that point, because you can't give your opinion to either party.
AKA advice.
Yeah, you can't provide any advice.
You
And I
become
have a hard
escrow.
time-
Yeah.
Yep.
Right. So that may not be what you want to do. And under limited representation, so let's say another agent from the office is on the other side, you can then do no harm. So if you were to go into a Realty One Group listing and you're like, oh my God, this house is priced so ridiculously high, you can't say that.
No, you can't,
Because that's harming the other party.
right,
Even if you're not even looking at a contract, you can't say that.
right.
If you are going into a Realty One Group listing, oh,
Yeah,
this is a nice house.
what I
okay.
say when they come in, if they say something, this is way overpriced, I just say,
Okay.
this is where it's priced.
That's right. Can't say anything else. All right. So the other thing is, what you're doing on an unrepresented offer, if you are writing up an unrepresented offer, you're going to ask them, what is their name? What is their legal name? You might even say, is that what is on your driver's license? Because that would help us, right? What is their legal name? And then you're dictating what the buyer wants, period. You are writing down what they are telling you they want, okay? Could you tell them that typical earnest money deposits are approximately 1%? Yes, that's not an opinion. That is something that is a standard in our contract. That is not your personal opinion, okay? Can they say, do I have to put that? No, you do not. You can put whatever earnest money amount you want to put down there. That is your choice. Not your opinion at that point. All you do is say, yes, I will write whatever you want to put in there. Okay. How much is are you doing a loan? How much is your down payment? You would need that, that pre-qual, right? Now, what if they say, well, I need to talk to some lenders. Do you have any lenders? What's your answer?
So you couldn't.
What's your
even-
answer?
At that point,
What's your answer to an unrepresented buyer?
say no, because I can't have an opinion.
Nope, you have no opinion. You
But I
have
put
no
my
recommendation.
card on the bar, on the table at that point. Is
If
that a problem?
Barb's card is
Wallet,
already
wallet?
on the table and they have already picked it up,
Okay,
that's
there you
great.
go. Thank you.
okay? But do you have a list of lenders? No, I do not. Do you have a list of inspectors? No, I do not. Do you have a list of title people? No, I do not.
Not that I can share with
Okay.
you.
Affiliated business arrangements, you certainly can share the ABA and say that on this listing, I have in this listing noted in the MLS that if you work with Rock Title, both buyer and seller, if the buyer elects to work with Rock Title, both buyer and seller would receive 50% off on their escrow fees. If you would like to put Rock Title, I just wanted to make sure you're aware of that offer. Put any title company you want down here. Well, who do you think? I don't know. You tell me who
I
you
don't
want.
think.
Nope.
Oh,
Nope,
that's
right?
tough.
Do you understand how clear cut it needs to be?
Do you see dual agency like this, which isn't? my
This is
opinion?
not dual agency.
Yeah, it's not.
This is unrepresented.
Oh, okay, so, well, shifting to dual agency, it's not real dual agency. I think real dual agency is when you represent both the buyer and the seller as like the listing agent. Not as, like, if I were to represent a buyer that also, I mean, if I were to represent a buyer, for Realty One Group, and I showed him a home that was represented by a listing agent that's also with Realty One.
That's limited agency.
That's not
Limited
dual
agency. No, dual agency is when you personally are doing both sides.
You have the listing and the buyer.
Okay, for some reason I thought that was also considered, and you had to fill out a consent to limited representation form.
Both of those you have to fill that. One of them has one agent on it. The other has two agents on it.
Okay,
The one with one agent only is dual representation. With two agents is limited representation. Yep, okay. I know. So the key is on an unrepresented buyer, do not give advice. Explanations may be okay, right? Because you are required to do fair dealings, but it's just the facts. Okay, if they asked a question that is going beyond the facts, you need to direct them to seek an attorney or other legal advice. You cannot provide anything more, okay? I would recommend that you save the current purchase contract to your desktop from AAR, the one that says sample written across it. If you are working with an unrepresented buyer, I would recommend you send over that version of the contract with sample written all over it, right? To the buyer to recommend they review that. Please, please, please do not send a blank contract.
can you do it with draft written all over?
Well, I don't know why you would, because AAR already has all of the documents with sample written all over them. So you can download,
Sample as an option.
go to AAR online.
Well, I mean, I was.
You can actually
I
Google
was actually going
the
to
document and it
transaction
comes up
with
with sample on it.
Huh?
Cause I always provide a sample contract with numbers written in. to
Right,
provide-
but then you've got something on there.
Yeah.
I'm saying don't provide a blank one. I'm saying,
Oh, I see.
but AAR already has them with that across there. If you go onto aaronline.com,
And then upload it into TV and then do it.
no. Put it on your desktop, send it to them prior. You shouldn't be using TD with an unrepresented buyer. You should be meeting the buyer and having them sign in person, not through transaction desk.
I just use transaction desk to fill it out.
I'm not asking you to fill it out. I want you to send a blank copy to an unrepresented buyer before you meet them so they can review it.
It has sample across.
Right, I like to put in numbers so that it
But
makes sense.
what numbers are you putting in? You haven't met them.
Example numbers, that's what I put. in.
No, because that's your opinion. You can't put anything on it. They need to see it unfilled out because they need to tell you what they want in there. You cannot send your opinion to them. So if you start putting numbers in there, that's your opinion.
Okay.
Yeah, just send them a sample with it written across there.
Okay.
Yeah, no, did you understand the reason I don't want you to?
Yep.
I get what you've done in the past, which is great, but you're sending that to your clients. And you can continue to do that. But an unrepresented buyer, you need to send them the actual contract so they can review it.
I wouldn't even think in dual agency you'd want to fill anything out, right? Because.
No, dual agency, I mean, he's just showing it as an example. But again, I just would be worried you're creating implied agency. Here's my recommendation, and you're not. With the dual or limited, I mean, you're already going over that
Yeah.
in working with them, so it's not a problem.
maybe a silly question, but if the unrepresented buyer gets the deal, you get the full commission.
So if there is no co-broke at this point, you get the full commission. So yes, because unless you agree to modify your listing agreement, line 39 says a total amount that the seller agrees to pay. Again, I have a feeling that that is going to change in our listing agreement. So I think we're going to have an ER agreement change. The buyer broker is going to change. So I think there'll be several changes that will be coming down as these modify. And the buyer broker, I think, is going to have some of those check boxes that we were talking about. Instructs me to call to ask about co-brokes, instructs me not to show properties where I've been told there is no co-broke allowed, you know. So I think they're going to be check boxes.
Can I ask a question? Because you've mentioned it 3 times now, and I'm new to Arizona.
Yeah.
Mark Staley.
Hi, Mark. Yes, we've talked.
You keep saying that you need to call to ask to get client from buyer permission to call to ask about a co-broke.
Yep.
I'm wondering where that comes from, because I mean, right now, you don't have to ask permission to look at the offer of compensation in the MLS. If we go down the road where you're gonna go to the listing broker's website to see if there's an offer of compensation.
Oh, that's
You don't-
assuming that there's a website for
Right,
those
but if
brokers.
we go down that road
Uh-huh.
where that's gonna be a way of communicating offers of compensation, we don't have to ask the buyer's permission to look at that website, do we? But
No,
we have to ask
Uh,
permission to call and have the conversation with. the
no,
listing
no,
broker?
no, 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 no. So, currently, so 2 different things. Great question. Currently, I said if there's 0 listed, or if the amount listed in the MLS currently, because there is something listed in the MLS, is not the amount on your buyer broker, that you do need to call, because currently we don't have any other method to address that. Again, I would have the buyers instructing you that they want you to call, right? Because here's the scenario. What happens if you have the VA buyer? They can't pay it, right? So with a VA buyer, you need to have that conversation. So because there's no offer of compensation in this particular scenario, do you want me to call and see if I can negotiate that before we go look at the property? Yes, please.
But
Right?
if you're
Because I
talking to
can't.
her, you can't negotiate it. You have to send an offer.
Well, but no, I think most people are not going to give you an amount anyway. I mean,
Right.
some might, but currently I think you're going to get, depends on what the
Yeah,
offer is.
Send the
And
offer in.
I think the challenge is, right, let's say we have a VA buyer. Again, let's say the property's $450,000 list price, and our VA buyer only qualifies for $425,000. Okay, folks, you're gonna have a problem, right? You already know the buyer can't get to the 450, and then you have to deal with the fact that there's compensation there. And currently, if there's compensation offered, great. But if there's not currently compensation, you've already got a challenge of $25,000. Because a VA buyer is going in without any money down, right? Without closing costs, which they often are asking the seller to pay closing costs, right? It's called a no, or 0, right? 0 down, 0 closing costs, and what's the other one?
0 payments would be nice.
No, not 0 payments, nice, but there are 3 of them. But at any rate, so, the challenge is then you're adding the buyer broker fee. So in the future, great question though, because in the future, do we have, the option is there, of course, that they might list it on their website. I would hate to tell you what the percentage of agents in this office who receive a free website, right? How many of our agents actually have activated their websites? By the way, there's a side business if you want it to help them create those.
Yeah.
No, but
A
seriously,
conversation at 1 o'clock today.
seriously, the number of agents in our office that receive a free website that have not activated is pitiful. Okay.
They're pretty cool. You can do a lot with it.
You can.
They have a lot of.
Right?
Really.
So the idea is gonna be, I want agents to know, one, your buyer has to be instructing you in writing on those issues, okay? And if they don't want to instruct you, fine, and you don't want to make those calls, I think the challenge is we make the calls and nobody's gonna answer. Right? So what do you do with a VA buyer that's $25,000 below list price already, that wants to look at this home and has no money to pay closing costs, the compensation? You can't show that home. Right? And that has to be an honest conversation with your buyer.
To work for free.
Well, you can work for free. That's true, right? You can work for free. So, but, yeah,
We work for free and we bring the contract here. You still have to pay the.
yes, ma'am.
So it's gonna
Yeah.
actually cost you money.
Yep.
To show your.
So the
VA buyer.
question was, if you do not get paid a commission, do you still owe your transaction fee to Realty One Group? And the answer is yes. Again, you have the right here to negotiate your commission however you want. The transaction fee is what the transaction fee is. So unfortunately, that the only time the transaction fee is waived is on your personal residence that you actually own and live in. And own is a key factor there. I had somebody that was selling that it was in a trust and they weren't a part of the trust. They lived in the home. Like, yeah, that's not really your home to sell. I know you live there, but you're not on the paper as the owner. So that doesn't get waived in that scenario. But so yes, you can work for free. If you really want to, you can do that. But I think the challenge is going to is how do we find out what the compensation is? And I really truly believe agents are going to have to be very diligent if you're on the phone versus an email. Email would be preferred, but I don't know that you're going to get it back either, right? But if you get an answer via phone, what is the first thing you're going to do? Email them back. Thank you so much for responding to me today, Mark. I appreciate that you're offering 1 pineapple or 2 pineapples for the sale of the property on this. I'll make note of that in my file. If anything in this should change, we will be viewing the home at 4 p.m. today. Please let me know before 4 p.m.
What if they don't respond to that email?
Then it's assumed that it's all the same. It says, please let me know before 4. So you're fine.
Okay. Knock on the door. Quick question.
Yeah.
So since I sent that buyer broker agreement, I did not write what we're talking about.
Do an addendum to the buyer broker agreement.
Do an addendum, okay.
You're gonna have to do, wow, it's between the buyer. I would use a blank sheet of paper. I would not use any pre-printed forms. I would use a blank sheet of paper and say it's an addendum to the buyer broker agreement. And because it's between the buyer and the broker. We have a listing contract addendum, but we don't have a buyer contract addendum, which I'm sure will be created. But does that make sense? So use a blank sheet of paper,
Okay.
put who is a party to it, right? The buyer and the broker, and then you and the buyer sign on the bottom.
Okay.
Please do not use a regular addendum. I just want to stress that I've had people use a regular addendum to try and amend their listing contract. The addendum is between the buyer and the seller. A listing contract addendum is between the owner and the broker. So again, I can't even direct you to that for the buyer broker agreement. So just a blank sheet of paper with this is, an amendment to the buyer broker agreement. It's fine. Just make sure that if that's going to title, that's included with it. You have to have all those pages. If they've all got to go to title. Give me another question.
Going back to, you can't give a donation for lenders.
Not to an unrepresented buyer. Unrepresented.
You can still cover or not cover, market with lenders.
Oh, absolutely. And limited representation or dual representation, you absolutely can provide at least those. You just have to, don't be providing one. You need to provide multiples. Here are multiple options for you to choose from. Mark, do you see this a lot? You're in Montana, right? Do you see a lot of, has your MLS had variable co-brokes all the way down to 0 in the past?
Yeah.
Did you see a lot that were at 0 up there?
No.
Yeah. So
Are you
not a
still
lot, but the model's been there forever.
Right.
I mean, in the past, it wasn't zero, because you had to put something in there. So, see,
Are you a
Right.
dual broker? Are you in both Montana and here right
Yes.
now? Yeah, or you do plan to remain that way?
for now.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I have a daughter and are you in the Bozeman area?
I'm Helena.
Okay,
Bauer,
okay, yeah,
Illinois.
thank-
So he's rarely here.
yeah.
He's been an agent here for a
I've
while.
been here more this winter than.
You have. Yeah, yeah, exactly. All right, did you have any questions online? Amy, do you have any questions? No? Okay. I'm gonna wrap this up here, but thank you. We will continue to have conversations about this. I will work to come up with some suggestions right now for a buyer broker agreement with regard to making the phone calls and stuff. Yeah,
And you're
About the
supplies with languages to use.
The clauses, you know.
right, for the buyer broker
Yeah.
agreement with calling on behalf.
Right.
Co-brokes and not showing.
I think one thing that bothers me that people don't seem to be real clear on, and you see a lot of it on social media, is that NAR nor any realtor is a criminal. A settlement is completely different from a,
Admission of
yeah.
guilt.
an admission of guilt.
Yes,
A settlement is to avoid going further in the legal system
Right.
and paying 10 times as much money trying to fight something than to just settle it, get it done with, and
yeah, the very beginning paragraphs say there is no admission of
Yeah.
guilt. And NAR stands by that they don't think that they've done anything wrong in any of this.
and the general public is just like, there's a lot of morons out there. that just, you know, you're all criminals, you know.
Yeah. You've always made too much money.
Yeah.
Yeah, I hear that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and I think, be prepared to show where that money goes. I mean, all of it, again, showing your value. Most people don't understand the expenses that we incur from our own health insurance, right? Our auto insurance, which is more expensive because we have higher coverage in case we put a client in our cars, right? All of that is increased. People don't understand that. It's like, I can't have bare basic auto insurance.
Right.
My insurance is elevated, right?
You know.
Our E&O that we pay, and then, yeah, our brokerage fees, all of our coverage for dues and licensing and CE credits and all those things that they all add up. And our lockboxes, our lockbox key services, right?
Yeah.
Signs, revising the signs. Somebody said they pay for gas. No, the company doesn't pay for our gas. And again, nobody has talked about rentals, so I have not seen how this is gonna impact I haven't seen anyone talk about rentals at all. So I don't know how this is gonna impact rentals. So we were already in a scenario, interestingly enough, that we had some big conglomerates that were really overpowering the market.
And they don't pay anything.
And they don't pay anything. But they still want us to show their property. So I guess if we all disappear from it, what happens then? So again, this actually occurred in the rental market a long time ago. Because I remember when we had the shift from, a percentage to a few dollars. And it was like, wait a minute, I'm showing a $2,200 a month rental and you want to pay me how much? Like, what? And, I shared with listing agents, I said, when you're taking those listings, you need to tell the landlord why it's important that you pay these fees, right? But the landlord's like, nah, I can get it sold.
Yeah.
Well, you can in certain markets. I get it rented. You can in certain markets. Otherwise, are you ready to deal with those phone calls from Zillow and Craigslist and start running around ragged yourself to go open your doors because you're not going to have a realtor that's going to be willing to do that for you? It's, depends on what the landlord wants to do. So, all right, let me shut this off. You guys have a good one online.
Thanks, Melissa.
You're welcome.